A freaking shotgun, I forgot. Oh yeah. Alright. Uh oh, what time is it? We good? John? Alright, cool. Um oh, okay. Are you sure everything's working? Damn, you got a gun? Yeah, dude, I got hella shit. Look at this. Look, I got a motherfucking SMG up here. I got two freaking pisties. Apparently, I don't have a melee weapon, which I thought I did, but maybe I toss that shit out. Alright, so this game is pretty much have you ever seen Boneworks before? When the Index first, which is the headset, first got released, they gave you a game already. It was like a bundle, and it came with Half-Life Alyx, and then Boneworks was like one of the second to best games for VR, or at least for the Index. Uh, but it's pretty much like a what was that game? It was like a kind of like this, like level based type of sheet. Go through, and you kind of do like a puzzle or some sheet, kill motherfuckers, and they have like a sandbox mode where you can like spawn in stuff and make scenarios and post videos on it, blah blah. Then they have for this one, it's like a updated version, so it's the same stuff. Like we have like the level with the puzzles and sheet, and then you got like six different game modes. One of them is like a time trial where you have to. I don't know if you're watching my. I don't think you were here from my other streams, but it was like I'll probably do one today maybe. It's like you go through with a freaking gun. You have to kill like 15 enemies within like whatever amount of seconds, and you get a score. And then it goes in the leaderboard. Blah blah blah. Then they have like a parkour one, which I freaking suck at. And then they have, I guess, the main campaign, which took me a while to understand the puzzle to get to finish or to start the campaign. I don't know. And I did a couple. What is this? These. Wait. It shows you where your motherfucking elbows are at? What the? That's freaking new. I didn't know. Wow, that's cool. Alright, sick. Oh no, I think it's just a skin I have. Never mind, I'm dumb. We're going to lead ring. Hail. Nah. Yeah, if someone do this, I don't know if you can. I guess if I just look down, you'll know that I'm freaking. My chat's right there. Um, Whenever I scope in with the gun, you'll probably notice, like, right now I'm scoping in. I believe you just see me looking at the ground because the game capture is kind of whack. Even if I put your view as my left eye, you still don't see sheet. And if I put it in the center, it's just two views. And it's just like two views, and it's just freaking dumb. So, you want to see one? Yeah, you guys see my right eye. Because I figured that might help with the whole, like, doing this sheet. But I don't know if it does. I can, you know what? I can try doing the. I can try doing the center, and you can tell me if it freaking. Ow, ow, ow. Looks any different. Okay, what mouse is mine? Oh, this one here. Where's my freaking mouse at? Oh, there's. I see it. Give me that sheet. Oh yeah. All right. I can't see sheet. Set up. No. Play VR view. Yes. Devices. Workshop. No. 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 Where do I change my sheet? Find out working anything? No. I think we're good. I had to freaking see overlay viewer. Here we go. What it is? Oh God. What? Oh, you know what? What the frick is this? No, get that shit out of here. There was an easy way of doing it. You just click a freaking button up here, and then click. Wait, this freaking workshop for this? Oh, I think I just gotta go in the settings and do it. Uh, Dashboard. Okay, you know what? It was easy. Oh, here it is. Yeah, so this is the right eye. Then you have. Look, did that even change? That doesn't change sheet. Wait, what viewer is it? Wait, what? What, both eyes? Oh, your view is different than mine. What the? Wait, what view are you going off of? The hell? Oh, you're going off. Oh wait, then you're not going through my right eye. You're just going through. Wait, what the frick are you going through? Frick? I thought I was capturing my VR sheet. That is not the button. What button is the menu? There it is. Spectator. Oh. Head. Oh, okay, now this is what you see. This is the 2-view thing I was talking about. Then you have left, which is my left eye, I'm assuming. Here, you know what? Okay, tell me if you can see me scoping in. Oh hell no, that sheet sucks. Alright, tell me if what does it look like right now? Am I looking at the ground? Right now I'm scoping in with my freaking shotgun. We see the gun? Oh, you do? Oh, for real? Okay. Now... What about now? You just see me looking at the ground, right? Or something? Or maybe you see, like, over here. I wonder if I should just go left view from now on. Calibrating battery armor. We still see the gun, but a lot less. Okay, well, let's roll with left. And you tell me if frickin'... Okay. Where do we live off? Okay, so we're in level 4. I don't know how many level... Oh. Well, I mean, I guess there's 9 levels. I think level 3... No, was it level 2 that was spooked up and I had to restart my Alright, well, I don't know what this level is based off of, so I guess we're gonna find out. Ooh, ooh. Ooh, ooh. Ooh, ooh. Ooh, ooh.
Okay, now we're getting to the good stuff. I can make you into whatever we need. You're strong now. Go knock some heads.
What the freak? Is that thing talking to me or is there someone in here? Oh, so you're going... I changed bodies. Alright, sick. Oh. Damn! Damn! Damn. Is this a horror game? I don't think so. You know what? Low key, I feel like it kind of is. But then again, it's not. Wait, is this a game mode? Wait, what is frickin' Street Puncher? I guess I'm doing a game mode. What the f-
Ain't nothing to see here.
Oh shit! Sir, hold on, sir. Give me 1 second. Beach. Get out, frickin' beat. He's dead. I don't know if you were an enemy. I'm gonna assume you were. What am I facing right now? Yeah, I'm good. Okay, I'm gonna go over here. I'm gonna take a wild guess. You guys might be enemies.
Ain't nothing to see here.
Is this time based?
Ain't nothing to see here.
How the frick? How do you? How the frick do you survive that? Well, hello? Bitch. Oh shit. The fuck? Oh, what is that? Oh, what that sheep? Oh, I thought that was ammo. Not ammo. Is this good for... I still didn't change my sheet. Is this good for long range? I'm already getting bullets. Damn, this shotgun's pretty good. I don't think he's dead though. Never mind, he's dead. Alright. Damn, this freaking shotgun's sick. Freaking aim, I'll check out you. Freaking out of my sheet. This freaking game's easy. You dead? Oh ho ho! Trying to fake me out. Ram that I have on PC. I know, right? Which is bagel. Want to see some god tier? Ready for this sheet? Here we go. You ain't never seen like this before. Here we go. Here we go. Like that sheet? Look at that. Freaking multitasking with beach. Always check dumpsters, dude. Could be freaking good stuff in here. Nothing in that beach. Yeah, freaking music in this game, dude. Christ is dead. No freaking shot you survived that much. Don't you dare get up, beach. That's what I freaking thought, motherfucker. Oh, freaking golf club? Oh, dude, this thing has some range. I'll have to keep this. Can I put you? Yeah. Oh, sick, I can. Look out of my way, beach. Beach! Beach! What is that? Freaking bricks? Brick? Oh, sheep. Dumb beach. What the fuck? Get your ass up. I hate how it thinks I'm crouching. I'm really not, dude. And you guys cut your sheet with this? What? Didn't I just reload this? I freaking suck. Oh, am I out of ammo? God, I can't see. Oh, I'm out of freaking ammo for this beat? Oh, shit. Okay, we have a problem here. We're gonna swap this out. Freaking put that sheet in there. That sheet right there. Switch hands real quick. Jam this motherfucker in here. Put this beach back. Take the clip out again. Put this beach back. Freaking beach. Beach. You can't open that. Alright, do we go down here? Fuck that. We're going this way. Never mind. I'm going this way. We're going this way. Alright. Is there a story in this game? So, I think the levels are considered the story. I think. I'm not 100% sure. This is making me very freaking dizzy. Holy shit, make it go. Oh my god, dude. I was told that after you do like the, because what you have to do, I guess, to continue the story is you have to play all the game modes they offer and then it unlocks like this little ball. You have to put the ball in this thing, and that's what does the whole sheet. I'm not reading that. And then he told me that after that, that's kind of when the story starts. So I guess technically I'm playing the story now. Freaking find out what's happening. All I know is I'm freaking killing mudchuggers. Freaking tall for these stairs, my guy. Oh my god, that makes me dizzy. Holy crap. Alright. What's up, little homie? Come here, out of that sheet. It looks like that was blocked off by... Freaking turret. Can I shoot the turret off? I cannot shoot the turret off. Okay, I need something to okay, here we go, watch this. Oh! Game already gives it to me. Alright. Pop that sheet out. Put that in there. What we're gonna do is we're gonna freaking pop that out. Then we're gonna take this speech, right? Use this as a freaking oh shit! Use this little shield real quick. Garbage. Yeah. Money. Did I keep a shield? Okay, they make sound when they're dead. I have to remember that. Do I need the shield still? Frick the shield. I don't need a shield anymore. Frick this. What the frick? How the hell do you survive that, my guy? Oh, shit! Saw that beach creeping like barely, dude. Let's get the shit. I got ammo for days. I don't give a shit. Are you dead, sir? Can you guys not peek on the corner, dude? That's freaking terrifying, man. What is that thing? Oh, a bat? Oh, a shield? That's for a reason. Probably some turrets up here. That beach went. Ugh. You give me a shield for a reason, my guy. Where are the turrets at? That's a big ass freaking wrench, bro. Holy frick. Gosh, me, what is this? That's what that is? Wow. Huh. Okay, what's up there? Do I want to go up there? I guess I do. What is that? That's a freaking. Okay, I thought I saw someone that. There has to be a freaking collectible up here.
Citizens. Officer down.
If dang. I don't want. Can I get some light up in this beat? Oh, what? What the? There's a turret on wheels? What? Or on a hover thing? What the frick? Excuse me, sir. The fuck? The frick? How do I kill it? Oh. God. Frick if I know how I did that. Okay. Is there any point of actually coming up here? What the frick am I up here for? I guess I got the collectible. Gee. I would get dizzy after this week playing VR games. Yeah. Especially if you haven't played in a while. Like when I first started playing this, I haven't played in probably like a year. And I was hooked up, dude. I only did like a 2-hour stream. I couldn't handle 3 hours because my freaking brain was like absolutely fried. My game. Where's the freaking ammo at? Ready? I'm not ready for this bagel. Are you ready for this sheet? Are you ready for this sheet? Yeah!
Officer down.
Dude, where the can I? Where's like the handheld torches? Is that not a thing? Because that needs to be a freaking thing. I need some light up on this beach. Why do I keep crouching, my guy? I'm not fucking crouching. I feel like it's kind of linear where to go. Maybe I have to go up there. Wait. Oh, I gotta. That's what it wants me to go up there. See, I knew there was a reason to go up there. Wait, so then what the fuck is the point of coming over here? Oh wait, there's something right here. Ha. This. Here we go. Freaking movement. Oh yeah. Is this the progression or is this freaking optional? Ah! Dude, how do you survive that, my guy? I don't understand. Critical. Yeah, this is definitely where I'm supposed to be going. Yeah. Wait, so then if that's... This is a lot of elevators. Did I go back and see what that sheet was? Oh, is that it? What is that? Oh, it's my friend. Okay, maybe I don't have to go over there. Okay. Do I still need this freaking shield? Forget it. Oh, Jesus. Oh, shit. Wait. Get. Oh. Oh. I didn't know this is a. Oh. Yeah, baby. Oh, I think I have to grab one of that. What's here again? What's here? Do I need that? Frickin', my god. Yeah, I freaking need that much. I gotta freaking catch this. Here we go. Wait, what if I had to just run with it? Yeah! Oh, that's the strat. Ah! Oh, that's the... Alright. What is it in this one? Alright. Easy freaking money. Alright. Where's my freaking shotgun ammo, my guy? There's no way you survive that. You're dead too, right? Okay, there's freaking no way you get shot 2 freaking bullets in the motherfucking brain. I know you're not dead. Oh yeah, this was just a trial, huh?
All quiet here.
I forgot I was supposed to be quick with that. What did I get? Forgot that was time based. What the fuck did I get? Oh. Unlock the person. I forgot I was supposed to. That is not the right way. That's freaking not the right one. Avatar unlocked strong? Oh yeah, that's the. Oh. Oh, okay. I forgot I was supposed to be quick with that. Can I move my chat more? Can I move this? How long does it take you to freaking calibrate my motherfucking sheet? Can you move, sir? Freaking grab that. Okay, already on to the next level. Okay, that was freaking easy. Alright. Where's my freaking ammo at? Where's my sheet? Oh. What? Oh. Alright. I guess we're on level 5. Not. This thing changes my Who the frick is this?
Gonna be fast. This was my first one. Still got a soft
Oh.
spot for it. Let's see if we can use that speed.
How many VR games? Where am I right now? I am facing the wrong way. Who the frick is this beach? How many VR games have you played? All the VR games I've played are all my, collection. Oh, shit, this is frickin' parkour. 11 seconds, huh? So, okay, I can name off a couple. Here. I've played Half-Life Alyx. I've played Bonelabs. I played, I believe I tried The Forest on VR. It was okay. I played Tabletop in VR. I played Gorn. I played this one, like, bartending one, which was actually pretty sick. I need to play that again. What else did I play? I played this one, like, parkour game that involved, like, using like, your webs and shit. But that shit was laggy as fuck, and I believe I played that on my 4092, so that game was, like, stupidly unoptimized. Freaking dumb. But, yeah, am I killing anybody here, or is this all just freaking parkour? This is definitely just freaking parkour. Okay. Alright, there you go. This is your freaking level right here. This one's dedicated for you. But yeah, I played it quite a bit. I haven't played as much as I've really wanted to, but I actually try and be quick. Oh, it's like I'm playing freaking Elden Ring, dying from motherfucking gravity in this beach. Of course. Yeah. Oh boy. We're gonna be here a while. You know, watch this. Do my freaking god, watch this. I can climb this sheet, right? What? You have to go. The game's forcing me to freaking not climb, alright? Freaking rude. Is there checkpoints? Dude, I'm not pressing down, my god. I don't know what. Wait, can I hold on to this? Go down. Oh, you can't hold on to anything? Okay. I mean, I guess this thing is called a freaking sprint, right? How did someone do this in 11 seconds? We like that little freaking curve I did, my guy? Oh god. Oh god. Ah! Oh. Oh. I don't, okay, I guess you can hold on to the sheet. That sheet when I... Wait, what? You just weren't allowing me to do it, now you will? Ah! Get freaking pistol back in there. Get your sheet up here, motherfucker. Get up there. Thank you. Get the fuck up. Get. What is happening? Get. Get your sheet. Get. Oh, thank you. Okay. All right. Oh, it's easy. Yeah, this looks wobbly as fuck. Oh, it actually has physics to it. Hello? Get frick out of my way. Hey, yeah! Yeah! Wait, clickable. Fuck the speed. That sheet. No. Good. Where'd it go? Did it fall? Where'd it go? Get. Ah! Cardboard box monitor. I love that. I've always wanted that. Get up, Peach. What the frick? Get up, Machuga. What the frick are you doing? Yeah, Peach. Let me in this, Machuga. Ah. Oh, shit, I have to put this on there. Get. Put this Peach on there. Yeah. What? Oh, shit, I have to. Oh, shit. Wait, can I just shoot that? I got freaking guns, Machuga. You have to put. You gotta put them together? Look, I'm wasting time over here, right? Boom. That probably would be stacked, huh? Did it work? What? What else do you want me to do? See, that's what I'm talking about. The game doesn't really give you much, anything else up here? That's. What the fuck are you going to do with this sheet? Ah, what's over here? Oh. Sword. What is that? Sword noodle dog. Oh, there's more. There's more to the level. That's not the end of the level. I thought that was the end. That is indeed not the end, because I'm pretty sure that sheet just freaking did that. Is there still 2 on there? Yeah, there is. This must have activated this sheet. I understand. It's not just this. I thought it was. Oh. Get your ass up here. Hurry up. Yeah, Peach. Oh, yeah. First freaking try up in this month. Look up. First try. Yeah. Money. Get it. Did I just come this way? Wait. No, I didn't, right? Wait, did I? No, I didn't. I didn't stand bridge before. Well, hopefully I'm not backtracking here. I'm gonna assume I might need that crate because it's just chilling there. But I'm pretty sure I can make this because I'm a freaking god. Yeah. Okay, yeah. I mean, if I would have jumped, that might have helped. Am I gonna restart the whole level? Thank God. Okay. I think I need. I'm down. Alright. I think I need to put this crate. I need to jump on the freaking crate and then do my sheet. Alright. Now I'm freaking down here. What the frick do you want me to do from here? Here, frick this? Maybe, am I supposed to spawn down here? How the frick are you supposed to get past that? I'm on top. Why the frick am I down here for? Bitch, you won't let me climb these sheets. Can I push them over? No. Wait, do you let me climb these? I already tried that sheet. You don't let me grab the side of that sheet? What? I'm gonna freaking hang off that. Oh, you're gonna go right here, huh? Ah-ha-ha. Ah-ha. Smart freaking guys. Alright, I see you. I lost my crate now. What am I supposed to do? Oh yeah. God. Do you actually want me to make that? Is that even possible to freaking make? I need my freaking crate back, dude. Where's that sheet at? Dude, I don't think I can make this. Actually, maybe. I can make it. Oh god. Okay, I can make it. Confirmed. Oh, don't break. Oh. I am slow as fuck, dude. There's no freaking shot I'm getting any type of reward for this. Oh my god, you want to freaking make this jump right here. Oh, Jesus. Alright. Got this on me. All me, dude. All me. Good. Please don't tell me I have to restart. Please don't tell me I have to restart. Please don't tell me I have to restart. I'm going for it. Oh, it's down there. Well, or is it up here? Wait. Oh, okay. I guess we're going down. Okay. Oh god, I'm getting dizzy. Oh boy. Oh god. Oh god. Oh god. Oh god. Please let it stop. Please, 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 please. Let it end. Let it end. Let it end. Oh god. Hopefully I'm not backtracking. Okay, I'm pretty sure. Yeah. Quick, 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 quick. Go for a freaking high score. There's no shot I'm getting a high score. Someone did this sheet in 11 seconds. Get. Jesus. Okay, arrow going that way. What the frick's over here? A whole bunch of nothing. Alright, just want to check. Look at that little freaking shortcut. Look at that freaking sheet. Get up, beach. Get. What do you want, my guy? What? What the? Beach, get. What the frick are you on? Alright. Yeah! Oh, there's more. Yeah! Oh, shit. No. Open. Thank you. Please don't scare me. Yeah! Yeah! You were supposed to go there? Oh, what's up? What's up, Mike? How's it going? Welcome to the stream. This game should have a Milena fight. I have absolutely no idea how to pronounce your name, and I really don't want to butcher it, but welcome to the stream, Mike. You're on 6 now? Magma Gate? Ooh, it's a freaking boss. I'm about to fight a boss right now? Begin oh, it's a freaking. Oh, it's a freaking defend. Oh boy. Gotta see those dodges, arrow. Alright, who the frick am I turning into? Here we go.
Okay, I've made you the heavy.
Wow, this
The
is.
armies of hell are coming for you. So plant your feet and hold the line.
Damn! Alright. Get. Damn! Alright. Oh, sheet. Do I use my own weapons or do you guys give me some sheet? Yo, this is freaking sick. I'm going back now. What am I stuck on? Oh, a hint. Okay, I'm actually Wait, do you give me guns or am I supposed to use my own sheet? What the frick's up here? Can you climb, sir? What do you want? Hello? Get. What? What? The frick? Am I supposed to? Wait, I don't have any guns. Yeah. What the fuck? Oh. Alright. I need to defend this. Get. Dude, what am I gonna stuck on? Fucking gun, dude. Get the. Oh my goddamn way, beach. Get the. Off this fucking beach, you. I don't have a shotgun? What the fuck? Get your freaking ass out of here. Beach, get the. Get out of here, much. Get your. Okay. Yeah, that's a cool ass game mode. I already kind of pooped up, but get. Beach. Yo, this is freaking. Wait. God, my sheet's so freaking not calibrated, dude. It's freaking crazy. Get the fuck off that sheet. I just crushed that guy in pieces. What are you? Oh, that's how it's done right there. What's up, my guy? Frick off me. God, they're barely moving. They freaking. Yeah, beach. I'll pop that man's skull off. What the fuck? What the fuck? Who's the frick? Yeah! Oh, shit! What the frick did I just hit? I think I just hit my microphone. You know it's getting freaking serious. Got my freaking boxing game from this beach. I don't think I'm doing a very good job defending this one. I'm freaking loud with you. I'm over here freaking breaking stuff. It's not how it's not it, Chief. Oh no, shotgun guy. Yeah, I'll just stand right here and block him. I'm so freaking thick, I'm getting stuck in everything. I think I'm losing. I'm pretty sure I am about to lose. Oh no. Beach, get my freaking way, Beach. Beach. No. I'm pretty sure I lost. I'm pretty sure I lost. Get. What the frick? My sugar get. Oh, okay. I think I lost that. Alright, I don't know what I hit. Did I actually hit my microphone? Sir, are you okay? I'm pretty sure I smacked the shit out of that. Yeah, I don't think I broke it. Okay. Okay, it's getting serious now. I didn't know, Wow, okay. It's getting pretty serious here. Dude, I am so freaking thick. Holy sh...
Okay, I've made you the heavy. The armies of hell are coming
See, now,
for you, so plant your feet and hold the line.
I need... See, this would be a good time to have a motherfucking melee weapon, but I ain't got shit. Now, I could just use guns, but I feel like that's boring. Like me, IRL? Do a Fortnite dance in the mirror? I don't even know any I can't remember any freaking Fortnite dances, dude. Beach, I don't even remember any Fortnite. I haven't put that sheet in like... Frick your hand in that sheet. Wait, frick it, let's use a gun. Dude, how... This is like... You know like that gun in freaking... I can't even put the clip in. My sheet is so freaking big. I can't put the ammo in. I can't even see where the ammo was at. Get. How did I get in before? Dude, I can't even see the gun. Get. Move. Ow. Yeah, let me see if I can just magically. Oh, there we go. Okay. I guess it's starting now. I guess we're not using. Okay, I guess we're not using guns because I can't even get that sheet. Dude, I'm so freaking thick. Bitch. I kind of like the whole like grabbing thing and just freaking yeeting him out of the freaking arena. I feel like it's kind of a good strategy because then I have some range, you know. What the frick? You just shot your own homie, you freaking Dumbo. Bitch. Where do you think you're going, huh? What the fuck do you think you're freaking doing, huh, Chugga? You're still alive? Let me stop on you real quick. Get your freaking ass out of here. You better not touch that sheet. You better. Get your shit out of here, Chugga. Get out of here. Get out of here. Get the frick out of my sheet. Nope. Frick out of my sheet. Oh, you want some too? Don't you? Frick out of here. I fell off. I fell off. I got a little bit too into it. I fell off. Okay, what if I stand over here? Because then if I do 360s, I won't be able to... Okay, we have a strategy now. Also, what time is it? I'm fucking sweating already. Alright, now we know what we're doing. See, I wish I would have kept that melee weapon, dude. I wish I would. How long do I have to do this for? The frick, I'm slow as frick, man. I don't get no assistance. What is that thing for? Am I supposed to interact with that? Fuck. Freaking shit. Okay, frick you. You're distracting me from these motherfuckers. Frickin'. Frickin'. Get your seat. It's my just be. Dude, I keep getting stuck. Get the frick out of here. I'm Chuck, get your ass over here. Where the frick did I just grab? Get over here. Frick out of here. Wait, I just used the body, see? Oh, I got a plan. Just do that. Oh, dude, this is the strat. Just freaking whale him, dude. Oh, this is the strategy. I forgot strategy. The frick that is. Hey, get the ground on me, Mochuk. What? Gee, I missed. Dude, stop getting stuck. Oh, nice. You killed your own guy. Nice. How did that not hit him? I'm getting real freaking tired of these stupid ass freaking shotgun motherfuckers. Beach. Beach. You're still alive? Where do you think you're freaking going, huh? Frick out of here. Frick you think you're doing, Beach? Get your ass out of here. How long do I have to do this for? Frick out of my face. You guys not dead? Frick out of my game. Frick out of here. What do you think you're doing? Get out of my freaking way, Beach. Dumbo. Get over here. Get the frick out of here. Okay, I'm doing good right now. I feel like I'm doing good. How long do I have to do this for? I can't handle much longer. I'm not gonna lie. Like I'm freaking doing a workout right now. Yeah, I'm getting real sick and tired of these. Hey, wait, I have to get this guy because he's gonna freaking stupid ass freaking shotgun done killed himself, dude. What the frick? Who's still alive? Okay, everyone's dead? Okay, cool. What is that button over there? I'm gonna go check out that. Wait, what? Why look it's oh, is that it? Oh, it's freaking it? Oh, dude. Can I get this first guy's skin? Dude, that was freaking stressful. I'm freaking sweating. That was freaking stressful. That was cool though. Alright, what are we on? 7 now already? Wait, 9? Wait, are we actually on 9 or on 7? Okay. On the moon. Oh, who am I playing now? Who am I playing now? Here we go, here we go, here we go, here we go. Who am I gonna be? Who am I gonna be? Oh shit!
Gravity. Look, sometimes the rules change.
Okay, look. I fell into it and it scared the shit out of me. What the fuck is this? That scared the shit out of me, dude. I like slipped and fell inside the sheet, and when I transferred, that beach was in my face. It scared the shit out of me. Why am I a cat? I'm slow as frick. Maintenance? Let me in. And also short as frick. And gravity's fucked up, probably because we're. So our goal is to freaking go to there. Okay. I freaking 4 fingers. All right, 3 fingers. All right. Okay. Oh my. All right. What is happening here? Wanting low gravity. Retrieve mission objectives. Okay. Have to go over there. Okay. That's gonna be actually pretty far away. Okay. What the frick are these things? These bounce pads? Oh my. Oh, okay. Alright. Those are kind of nice. All I gotta do is go over there. Check out those optionals. Whee! Can I unlock with this stuff? Are you here for looks or can I actually do something with you? What is that? 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 What are you freaking stuck on? What is that? What is that? What is that? Flashing icons, flashing stuff. I think my objective's over there, but we're going over here first. Maybe this. No, because I see some shit on top. I'm pretty sure that's. I'm going over here first. Oh, I'm freaking slow as fuck. I see why the boost pad things are here now. Work up here. You can totally make that sheet. Cannot make that sheet because you're freaking small. What the flick is over there? Go the long way. That looks very important. Make it now. Frickin' can. Frick up here, you dumb beach. Come on, mother trucker. I know you're a freaking cat and all, but you got this sheet. Come on, you made for freaking climbing. There we go. Oh yeah. Okay. I'm gonna freaking just straight up go over there and touch it and see what the frick happens. Pretty sure I can make it up there. If not, I can just frick go over there and jump and. They can make. If you can stand up, that'd be fantastic. Can you? There we go. Yeah. Oh yeah, easy money. Can parkour action over here? All right, I can do this. Oh god. Okay, frick it. We're just gonna climb like this. Frick, trying to be cool in this part, and we're freaking doing it the old classic way up in this beach. Okay, that works. Can I hold on to this? Please, 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 let me cover the sheet. Yeah! Oh, yeah. That's... I'm going backwards. What the frick? No. What the frick happened? What the food? This is definitely the level. I don't know if I can do anything else with the other sheet, so I guess we just won't go over there. But fuck, we might have to. We're probably gonna be here for a hot minute because this freaking gravity is really freaking messing up with me here. Forget. Let's just go on the side. It's a lot easier than actually just freaking walk on that sheet. Do shit. And you're over here trying to grab sheet, doing sheet, and then you're doing sheet. Okay, why can't I have to go on there to freaking jump? What the frick is? What is happening? Jump and freaking grab that sheet. Okay, pull yourself up. Now let go. Don't go back. No, no, just go forward. Not that way either. Oh my god. Okay, just go up. Just go up. Up, 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 up. Get. Okay, I can climb. Okay, we're good. Get your cat feet up on this freaking beach. Give me that sheet. Give me that sheet. Whew. It's literally called short. Okay. I don't know if I can do anything else here, so frick it. You're not in camp anymore? You should probably disable it for games. At least if you walk out of it. Well, the thing is, I don't even have it really cropped. I think the only place I have cropped is up and down. Not even. Oh, I'm not even. Oh, not even left and right. Right away. Is this the frickin'? This is the thing, huh? Bitch, get in here, motherfucker. Oh, who am I gonna be?
If you're getting behind the wheel,
Oh, okay, I'm going.
we need drivers more than you might think.
Oh. Oh, shit. I think we're actually gonna be freaking. I bet. We're actually. Yeah. You actually get to freaking do one go karts. I think I saw this in the trailer. Do you really want me to freaking eat this up? I freaking will. It don't work. You can't freaking eat it up. Oh, I'm just going through. Fuck it. There's a freaking go kart. Who would have thought, dude? I'm having trouble getting in the freaking place. Stay there and do not move. Let me go through. I'll crawl through the sheet. I'm going. Ooh, get your freaking. Thank you, Jesus frick. Oh my God, your boy's out here. Oh yeah. Oh shit. Oh ho ho. Shit. We're freaking out here. Oh my. Oh God. Wait, how do you go forward? Oh God. Okay, I have to hold that and then do this. Oh. Oh shit. Oh shit. Oh. Oh my God, for quick shit. Okay, here we go. Oh yeah, get the drift. Oh, 360. Oh my. Oh God. Oh yeah, nice drift. Oh yeah, it's freaking smooth. Don't look at chat while driving. Can I... Ref, can I get a flip? I'm not holding on to that anymore. Ref, can I get a flip? Can I get a flip? Can I get a freaking slow-mo? Can I get a flip? Can I... How do you get out? Sir, can I get a flip? Oh. Fuck if I know what I did. Okay. Alright. I forgot how to steer. Okay, I forgot how to steer. Okay. Alright. Drift. Oh, that was sick. Hard drift. Oh, yeah. Okay. Oh my God. Like there's 3 laps of this? Gee, oh God. Oh Lord. Oh Jesus. Okay. Oh God. What do I have a pistol out for? Oh. Can you go back? How do I always get stuck? What the fuck button did I press to reset? The fuck? I can do that? Oh. Get. Yeah. Okay, I had to hold on. I'm getting freaking motion sickness over here. Hold on, pause for a freaking second.